You are listening to the Nosy Dragon. I'm your dungeon master / innkeeper, Jesson. I am joined by my players / patrons, Ben.
Why, hello there.
And Josh. In today's session, we talk all about quests and missions. This episode was made possible in part by Tiamat, Dragon Queen of the Nine Hells. Welcome to the tavern, boys.
Great to be here. I just don't even know where else I would go at this point.
I'm just glad to have somewhere where I can get the weight off my boots, because, man, I've been doing a lot of walking. Fetch quests.
Yeah, where were you, Josh? I feel like last week you didn't come to the tavern. Were you like on a quest or something?
Yeah, on pretty big one. Pretty wild, you know. This like guy gave me this ring and I had to do something with it. It's such a long story. Oh my god, I could put it out in 3 books easily.
Wow.
But so glad to be back. Crisis averted there.
It looks like your feet grew. Were they always that big?
No, definitely not. Yeah, I think that was an adverse effect of the ring.
Oh, wow.
Just kind of like made my feet huge and
the toe ring or something?
It was actually. So it was a toe ring. It might seem like I'm referencing, Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. No, it was a toe ring I had to wear that just as I wore it, my feet got larger.
Oh, wow.
There was this crazy guy who was obsessed with having the largest feet, and we had to get it away from him. So we just took it to a local blacksmith and had it smelted down. It wasn't a big deal.
Wow. Sounds a lot more interesting than my quest.
It's fantastic. Well, I have a quest for you, both of you, if you're interested, and it's to help me talk about quests and missions in this episode.
Quest
accepted. Putting that in my favorites bar. That one is my currently doing quests.
Yeah, that one's starred for sure.
That one's starred, yeah, 100%.
Oh my gosh.
Man.
So, one thing. So when I'm trying to create quests for my D&D game, the first thing that I did was I have a notebook, a little pocket notebook, fits in my back pocket really easily. And in that notebook, whenever an idea would pop into my head, I just pulled out the notebook and would write down an idea. And it wasn't like take the ring to the mountain where it was created and throw it back in. And no, nothing like that. It was like a creepy priest wants you to retrieve flowers for sexual reasons. I wrote that down, and then later it was like, the well has dried. Go down into the well and find out why. None of the shipments are making it into the town. Discover what's intercepting the carriages, and figuring out what that was I did later, but just jotting down those ideas so that I could easily flesh them out and turn them into quests. Something that really made me be able to bring a lot of quests to life.
Yeah. Oh my god, absolutely.
Literally. Yeah, I think that's good too. You go ahead.
All right. No. It's just some of my notes are for my dungeon mastering are as simple as goblin barmaid or something like that, and that's the starting point, and then all of a sudden a huge quest branches off of that, and it can be the dumbest littlest thing, but you got to write it down.
Yeah, I had a quest. It was river made of alcohol. And then it got turned into the rotting river, and it was like, oh well, there's these magical trees that drop fruit, so they grow and drop fruit so fast that it's rotting on the ground, and the rotting liquids are combining from these trees and streaming into the low point, creating a river of fermented fruit juice, which is like an alcoholic river. And it wasn't really a quest. It was, but it became one once I was like, okay, now it's time to bring it alive and bring it into the world. And it's like, okay, well, there's these giant wasps that are making honey from this river, and the honey is like brandy but honey. It's like alcoholic honey, and
Yeah.
you gotta like get into the beehive or the wasp hive and retrieve some of this honey for a an innkeeper. So
Wow.
that was like the idea, and then as it you try to put it in the world, a lot of the questions of like, well, what is this? You start to answer
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah, it's true. I have that same, like a note of a lot of different, like, kind of the tagline of the quest. I think I have usually like a little bit more written down, like, um, this is like the mayor of a town wants your party to hunt a beast that's plaguing his family for a long time. It turns out it's him, and he's a werewolf. So it's
Okay.
like kind of a tagline like that. And
Yeah.
I like that.
but then it's like I think that same thing where it's like you have kind of your like quests like in your back pocket, and when you feel like it's an appropriate time to bring it out, then you can kind of flesh it out. And I think also like on that same topic, I think sometimes it's good to like go for, well, that's my personal opinion is like you want to go for like a less fleshed out. And maybe we'll cover that later. I don't know.
No, I
Yeah,
get
I
that.
think like it's funny some of the stuff that I wrote down in my notebook that you guys actually played through these quests quite a lot was
Yeah.
I wrote down simply awaken the Tarask.
Oh man, that's where that started. That's
It's
It
crazy.
is.
it's hilarious to hear like the River of Alcohol too was a quest that we played, and it's really funny to hear it as like just like even a sentence fragment.
All of a
And
sudden,
then
the
it's like,
memories come flooding back. Like,
Also,
whoosh.
I wrote above it drunk treants.
Oh my god.
I love that. I love that. But then that's like, yeah,
Yeah, a lot of them never happened. Like there was the lost wood elf frozen in amber in the heart
mm,
of a tree.
Oh wow.
And that's actually why I ended up naming you guys the Storm of Amber, because it was like this amber thing. Amber was supposed to play a big part of the game of like these secrets hidden in amber, and it actually it just never
Oh
happened.
wow.
that's really good. That's really good.
Mm.
Yeah.
That could have been a fun like backstory or something, like a flashback to like we had done like a an Amber quest giving us the name, but
Hmm.
Yeah. It
But
just
yeah,
it never really panned out.
it just goes to show that sometimes when you have ideas for quests, they don't always get implemented, and that's fine. You know.
Yeah.
it's true. And on that same topic, it's like sometimes you have a quest or an idea for a quest or something you really want your players to do, and as players do, they're not super interested or they are not picking up on the clues you're putting down, and it's really hard to motivate them to like to do your quest or like to get them interested, kind of like hook them,
Oh
you know?
man.
Yeah. The other thing that I do after, so once I have like 10 quests, 20 quests in my notebook, then I'll start the work of how do I weave these together, and
Hmm.
that's like linking the quests in my world. And
Yeah.
so now I'm like, well, in
Hmm.
order to link these quests, I need to know a little bit more about each one. So I'm like, okay, the priest who is like a pedophile for roses, that whole thing comes from the word pedal file. I was
Oh
at work and I thought it was funny and I was like, pedophile priest
wow.
who wants to do weird romantic stuff to, like roses.
This is that is
Yeah. Oh my
hearing
God.
hearing this stuff is blowing my mind. Like, are you serious? That's where it comes.
So
It is
I wrote
funny
that
to
down and I
see.
was like, okay, what's the priest's name? And I like looked around my room and there was what was it? It was like a speaker, like a Bluetooth speaker, and the Bluetooth speaker was Altec Lansing. And I was like, I'll just change one letter. I'll knock Lansing.
Oh my god.
God, that is, yeah.
That was the name of the priest. And then I was like, okay, who can I connect him to? And I was like, all right, well, the missing bard, I will connect that to the tavern owner, and I will
Mm.
have the tavern owner and the priest be in a relationship. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. Why is he a pedophile? I was like, whatever, I'll come back to it later. Like maybe he's leading her on for appearance's sake. I don't know. And then like as the world grew and I linked more and more quests to each other, it started to become a really serious campaign. And
Mm.
Alnoc Lansing went from the pedophile to this like really he like a messiah character, and the rose bush that he needed you to go find is so hard to find because it's like this moving rose bush, and his family is sterile historically, and they use this magical rose bush to distill this like love potion that he can drink with his spouse, his future spouse or whatever, and then he will become fertile for the next X amount of period, and they can have a child. And it like
Wow.
it yeah, and so like it grew from this thing, and it made this really deep, rich, lore-filled world, and all of them came from just like little jotting down. So taking ideas and
Mm.
Yeah.
linking them together forces you to flesh them out to make them link together in a way that makes sense, and they kind of write themselves. And I like
Yeah.
this world building style because it creates a game, an open world that you can explore that's really similar to like Skyrim.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
also like that point because I think when I design a lot of like the quests that I've like worked on, I kind of do it in more of a like circular way where it's like you do your quest, it takes you somewhere, you come back, and then you go to the person that gave you the quest in that kind of way.
Yeah.
But I think it's sort of good to like have like a one quest lead into another, rather than
Mm.
like you complete your quest, because that's also like I that's kind of my thought to talk on the topic of Skyrim. Is that's sort of like how you do Skyrim quests. It's like you go, you get your quest, you go do it, you go back, your quest is done, then you're like, now I'm here, now I better like go to this part of the map to like do this quest. But I don't think that's as conducive to the like D&D. Well,
Mm.
I think it can be, but I think that is a good style of weaving your quests together so that like
I think
as you
another awesome thing is like link all of your quests to the end game, right? So
yeah.
the well drying up at face level, it just looks like, oh, it's just a quest to do in this little starting village that the campaign was starting in. And it's like, oh, well, actually, there's a black dragon who drained the well. And he's there because he's looking for a MacGuffin that all the bad guys and all the good guys in the campaign are looking for, and he is a servant of someone greater. And so it's like if you go down that rabbit hole, it will connect you to this big bad evil guy. However, if you
Mm,
don't and you discover the artifact, the MacGuffin, without dealing with the black dragon, it could lead you to this good guy or to this bad guy. And they're all the good guys and bad guys are connected into one story as they're all trying to collect the 10 MacGuffins to rule the world. And so it's like everyone's rushing to
yeah.
try to find them all.
Mm.
And so it's like they're simple quests, so that surface level look like totally disconnected, just like random fetch quests and stuff. But actually, all of them ended up being connected to the end game because I had to link all of them. They all ended up being linked, and then even the end game content was linked to this little village
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
why is the well dry? And I think that gives the game, it makes you look so much more mega mind galaxy brain as a DM because they feel like,
Yeah.
whoa, like, oh my God, you saw this coming all along. And it's like, no, I didn't really take all that much planning. Like I just wrote down a bunch of really basic stuff and filled in some characters. They really didn't even have personality. Like it was just like a name and a gender and an age.
Yeah.
And I didn't
Mhm.
really make them a character till you got there.
Yeah.
And it just because you linked something doesn't mean you can't move that link later if you want to, or change it up. And so yeah.
Oh man, and definitely as a player, like having those kind of like full circle moments where you're like
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
piece at the beginning connects to the one at the end, and then you're
Yeah.
led down this, or you march your path that this like simple quest has, and you end up getting like a piece of the artifact or whatever that leads to like all these other answers to what happened towards the beginning, which is of course unfurling, as you know the DM describes it, is so cool. It's so fun to like have those epiphanies as a player
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
feel like you discovered it for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that is something that can make the world feel living and breathing without much effort. You with those quests, and missions. You can make the game feel like it's a real place that people live in that you happen to be exploring
Yeah.
rather than like a linear story
Mm.
that's being fed to you as you go along. It's like instead you're like exploring in this world. I think it's a really simple technique and it doesn't take much time. Like it probably took me a week of jotting down ideas in my notebook, and then it probably took me and that was just like I'd be at work and an idea would strike me and I'd write it down. It wasn't like I sat down and was like, I've got to think of compelling ideas. It was just kind of like
Yeah.
I'd be at work and then I would be like, huh, that's funny. And I'd pull out my notebook and write it down. And maybe it didn't make it into the end game, or maybe it did. And so there were plenty of things that didn't make it or changed so much from what the idea was, like the pedal file changed
Yeah.
so much that it's completely unrecognizable from the seed idea, but it doesn't really matter. Like the seed ideas are just to give you something to work with.
Yeah, definitely. And it's when you have those, a lot of your players, like if there's a lot of, like if you as a player are on that seed or on that hook and you show interest in it, that's going to show your DM like, oh, this is something that I want to dive into further, and it can become a much bigger plot point than when it was first initially planned to be. So,
Yeah.
like as a player, you have a lot of power as to where your campaign goes. At least, if you have a good DM, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of like fluid worlds as far as a DM. It's something I learned. There's a lot of value in a fluid world in the sense of like I had a
Yeah.
quest for a one shot I was running for some friends, kind of introducing them into D&D, and so they are inquisitors for the temple, and they make their way into town, and they're looking for something. A little girl went missing, and they think that it was foul play is at foot, and so their job is to go to the town, talk to the mom, and try to figure out what happened. And so as they come in, I describe this church, and I describe how the church is super old and crumbly and like falling apart. It's still standing. It's not abandoned, but it's pretty dilapidated, and it's got a really slap job repairs, and there's moss growing all over it, and there's two statues right in front of the church. One is broken and mossy and old and chipped and pitted, and the other one is perfect, pristine, beautiful, and clean, absolutely flawless. But the pedestal it's standing on is really damaged. And they're like, huh. And then they go talk to the mom, and they're talking to her, and they're investigating, and they think like, oh, okay, we're starting to get an idea of what's going on. And I'm like, great, they know it's a gargoyle. And then they go talk to the tavern keeper, and like I'm like, oh, while you're talking to the tavern keeper, roll me a perception check. And then they're like, they get high enough roll. I'm like, you notice through the corner of your eye that one of the statues is missing. So the dilapidated statue is still there, but the clean, pristine statue is gone.
Mm.
Anyway, and then they're like, huh. And so he's like, I asked the tavern keeper about it, and he's like, oh, there's only one statue in front of the temple. There's always only been one. And they like open the door, and he's like, see, just one statue. And they're like, huh. So they keep talking to the tavern keeper, and they're like, yeah, okay, we figured it out. And I'm like, what do you think it is? And they're like, it's a vampire. And I'm like, what? They're like, hear us out, hear us out. The little girl is the vampire. And she went missing when her dad left town because she killed her father. Okay, look at all the dots. And they started like putting all these like little things that the people had said, pointing to how it's a vampire. And I was like, that is not at all what I intended. But honestly, that sounds a little bit more fun. And like, I also
Yeah.
kind of want to reward you guys for your creativity. So I'm like, yeah, I didn't say like, yeah, it's a vampire. I was like, interesting theory. And then I just totally abandoned the gargoyle. Just
Yeah.
like,
Counted it as some illusion or something. Yeah.
and they had so much more fun. And then they faced down the little girl in the church, and like it was epic and exciting, and they felt smart and like detectives and stuff. So I think like fluid world building, including like when you have a nice quest, if I was like, no, I'm gonna stick to it's a gargoyle, it might have been kind of disappointing for them. And they're like, oh, so the gargoyle kidnapped the little girl? Like, why? Like, and it's like I didn't really have a good reason for why. I just thought we'll do a simple thing. We'll do a gargoyle. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. It oh, yeah. Cuz that's what you had wasn't originally part of your hook. Like the monster didn't really matter. It was like, oh, there's the statue that's appearing and disappearing, and it happens to be a gargoyle, but pieces can come and go and change and mold.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think sometimes your players will make connections that are stupid, and you're just like, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But other times, the things that they come up with can be so clever and so ingenious that you would be dumb as a DM not to take responsibility for it and be like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's totally what I thought from the beginning.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's good.
So yeah, don't and as a player, don't be afraid to have those moments to show off your creativity. If you have an idea or an epiphany or like some discovery that you want to like present to the rest of the group, do it. Don't hide that shit. Like be inquisitive.
So, how do you guys make interesting quests that will hook players and keep them motivated to go down the rabbit hole?
Number one
Yeah.
for me is the NPC that gives the quest. Like
Mm.
a lot of the times a quest can like begin through a clue or in like maybe a sudden combat interaction or like, whoa, why the heck that happened. But honestly, I feel some of the most reliable methods for making a quest is making an interesting NPC that has something to do with the character's backstories or goals and have them get to know and connect with that person so that they feel like they want to do this for them or that they're promised some prize at the end.
Yeah.
So, like character motivation in the sense of like, oh, we like this person or we find this person, shady or something, and so now we're curious and we want to know more. Not
Yeah.
Yeah.
just be like, I'll give you this shiny item.
Definitely. Yeah. And that doesn't always pan out. Like I've definitely had NPCs that I intended to make like interesting and connected and like maybe the point of a mystery or something.
Yeah.
And then when there's this grand reveal that they show up, they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, who is that guy again?" Like, what?
Yeah.
think
It
that-
happens all the time. Yeah.
That proves that you didn't do a good job of making it interesting.
No, honestly, I didn't.
No, I know what you're talking about. And I'm just like, no, you were like, he's a tour guide to the city and he's going to guide you around. And I was like, cool. He's a background character that doesn't matter. He is explaining how we are getting from the gate to the temple or whatever so that we can just kind of yada yada through the city.
Meanwhile,
And I did not.
you guys remembered the orc head justice that reigned over your court case that was
Yeah,
just like
Yeah,
to let
he
you
was
into
really
the city
important
from
to
being
it.
arrested.
Good paladin, and all he cares about is law and stuff. So he's like, "Ooh, a law person." You got me interested. I think, yeah, like that's a good point about hooks. Is like finding things not just that your players are going to find interesting, like, "Ooh, that item. He's going to give us a +1 sword. All right, I'm in." I think it's also finding something that your players' characters are going to be invested in.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
I'll give an example in the campaign that we're playing right now. Ben is our DM, and I'm playing this character who has a pain point in his backstory around the death of his spouse. And so my character is kind of like really passive and not really all that interested in what's going on. And then Ben is like, oh, the the NPC in question that we're investigating, his spouse died to a disease and he's been depressed ever since. And then my character immediately grew in interest like 80%. As he's like, oh, I've struck a chord. I know what he's going through. I feel what he's feeling.
Yeah.
And immediately made me like, okay, now I really want to investigate to make sure, is this guy actually good or bad? Or is he just depressed and acting out of impulse and emotion? Because my character is personifying his own emotions, projecting his own emotions onto this NPC, and my character is feeling as if he were that NPC, and now he is trying to exonerate him for his own purposes because he doesn't care about really what's true. He feels like, oh, I'm on the block now. I'm being judged for my behaviors when I became distant and I lost my way because I lost my spouse. But I found myself and I wish that someone stood up for me. So I'm going to stand up for him. And I'm going to go help him. And it's like, that is really hard to do, but I'm just saying like those are really great things to like kind of think of your players' characters and what their what your players are like exemplify about their character a lot, and then throw in a plot hook that would motivate their character specifically, right? So,
Yeah.
Josh, you were playing that half dragon in a campaign. It was all about like
Yeah,
honor and strength, and it's like, well, okay, here's a competition. Oh, your character's going to want to prove himself in that competition.
exactly. Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't even have to give you a reward. Like, in fact, I could promise your
The re-
character might get injured, and you'd still do it.
it's true. The reward is when. Yeah, no, it's so true. That's a really good point to create those like hooks, not just for your players, like having an interesting piece of loot or like, oh, this is a funny NPC, but having like plot, like having these things be very valuable to like your character. Or, yeah, like exemplify these like important character traits. Yeah, no, that's a good point. For me, I think like something that's not necessarily like getting a character motivated, but keeping them invested is like the way that you kind of like put the breadcrumbs down. I think is
Hmm.
important because I do feel like I think it's easy to like not. It's there's a really hard balance between like giving like just a little bit too not quite enough and then it's like I don't really know what's going on and then they get to the end and it's like wait who is this person who we're seeing that's like betrayed us or you kind of like you give too much and then it's like um and then you're kind of like the players are like oh I already know what's happening and then kind of like the fact that they feel like they've already figured it out
Mm.
or like it seems so obvious
Yeah, it kind of
sometimes
becomes
that
boring.
yeah exactly so I think the way that you kind of like how you give hints and like interesting set pieces I think what I something I'm thinking of is I ran a like a horror themed campaign a little while ago and there was this character that was like kind of a steam powered robot cook and he was like when they found him, he was kind of like falling into disarray. And he was like, his like, he was like programming was bad. So he was like continually making food. And the players could see that he had like an unbelievable amount of food that he had made. And it was like in various stages of like rot and decomposition. And there was one player, especially, who was like super interested in that and was like, and I think I could kind of sparked in everyone like, why is that the way it is? And I think like, giving little like I think that's like, an
Yeah.
example of like those mystery style campaigns. But when you kind of like you get a clue that feels like you're getting closer, or you kind of like you get those like significant pieces of information along the way that are like, oh, this is important. And so it feels like there is a sense of progression in what you're finding out, who you're meeting, and like what you're learning.
Mm. Absolutely.
Mm,
It's all in a matter of description. Like if as a DM, the more
Yeah,
emphasis you put on like time you put into describing surroundings or an individual person, a creature, a spell, even the more focus players are going to have on that just kind of naturally.
yeah.
it's
Which
true.
brings us to our this week's sponsor, Describe. No, I'm just kidding. They're not sponsoring.
No, I will describe anytime you want to sponsorship. Just let us know.
Yeah.
We
Yeah, I
will
think
sell out.
I prescribe you as a DM to describe you. Yeah. Yeah, man. I think yeah, a good mystery can go a long way in propelling your players forward because it's like, well, now their curiosity needs to be sated, and they're just like, I just
Yeah.
need to know the answer to this.
Yeah.
Those can also be troubling because once they find out the answer, they might be like, okay, yeah, I'm not interested anymore. Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I had that happen. I was a very young DM, and I had them go. Party go on a quest, and they accepted this quest from a secret group that worked for the king, like the secret service of the king. So they're in this secret lair, talking to them, and they're put on this quest. Then they leave the secret lair and they go find the wizard that kidnapped the princess, and he's a real chump. And they're just like, how in the world did this guy kidnap the princess? And they discover that he has like this curse that if he dies, he always reanimates in this cavern like immediately after.
Mm.
And so like he is been Marioing his way through the castle and like
Oh
just
shit.
dying and keep trying and dying and keep trying. And like he believes that marrying the princess will break his curse or something like that. Um, or he's just a creep, who knows? So
Yeah.
they rather than kill him, they tie him up and they rescue the princess because they're like, well, if he's just tied up here, then he'll take a lot longer before he respawns. So
Oh my
he'll have to
god.
starve to death first. Like, so they
Oh
leave.
my God.
And when they come back, all of the Secret Service people are being killed by these ninjas. And the ninjas run away as they approach, and this quest giver is dying, and he's like, you must go to the king and tell him what happened, blah blah blah. And it's this mystery of like, wait. Those were the king's assassins killing the king's secret service? Like, what is going on? And
Yeah.
it's like, you
Yeah.
must go to the king, return the princess, and tell him what has happened here. And he's about to complete his sentence. Like, it was, and he dies. And they're like, what? And one of them is like, okay, he's about to die. I'm about to have him die and let him die because so that the secret dies on his lips and they have to go, do the quest to find out what. And then the other player is like, oh, I cast, cure wounds. And I'm like, oh, right. Shoot. Okay. Yeah, he's fine now. And they're like, okay, what were you gonna say? And he's like, he explains the whole quest because he has all the knowledge. And they're
Yeah.
just like, yeah, we're not gonna do that quest.
Oh
That was
no.
that was the whole
Yeah.
campaign. And so I was just like, well, that concludes our campaign. Like, I don't
Oh,
have anything else for you guys.
what a
Like,
shift in the
Yeah.
let's get
gut.
together next week and figure out what to do next.
Yeah.
No.
That's
Yeah, so I've had that happen more than once. I
Ugh.
feel like that happened actually at the last campaign that we were doing, the forest campaign. You guys met up with um, the the god, right? And the god explained what he was up to, and then everyone's kind of like, "Oh, mystery solved." And then the campaign ended the next week. Like it was just kind of like, "Yeah, well." We kind of know why everyone's doing what they're doing, and like I didn't really have much drive or
Uh,
motivation beyond just the mystery of what's going on. And so it's like now that everything was finally laid bare, it's kind of like, well, that was all right, we're done.
yeah. We've done
oh
it.
man.
Yay. Yeah.
So I think it's a double-edged sword. You definitely want to use um quest hooks in an interesting way to kind of pull your players along, but also you don't want to have that be the only thing that's motivating the party.
Definitely.
You definitely
Yeah.
want to throw in some revenge seeking, rescuing. That's always good.
Mm-hmm.
hmm
um
hmm
Making
Revenge,
a name for
rescue.
yourself. Speaking of making a name for yourself, this part of the episode is sponsored by Tiamat, the Dragon Queen of the Nine Hells, has sponsored this portion of this episode. She wanted us to tell you to join her unholy legion or perish. Thank you so much, Tiamat, for sponsoring that portion of this episode.
Yep. Thank you so much.
So
Um,
another instance, mystery can go it can go wrong if it's only the mystery, or depending on what players you have. Because I remember a specific instance in one of your campaigns, Justin, where we had a player and there was this big murder mystery that was going on where this like man had to supposedly killed himself after an affair. A woman was missing, and there was this whole big mystery. And the woman who was sort of suspect, we were trying to kind of keep her busy. She owned a bakery, and one of our players, who happened to be just a little bit more on the murder hobo side, was sneaking around back to get information. And after the woman who was suspect shoot us out of the room, discovered that player, and that player just killed them. And the
Yeah.
the whole mystery aspect of it kind of flew off the rails.
Yeah. It stopped being a
Yeah.
mystery and now it's like, oh shoot, now we have to cover up our mystery.
Yeah.
We have a mystery of our own. Yeah.
Who murdered this woman? Wasn't me.
No, we have to
Something-
find something else to prove our innocence.
It's so funny. I'd actually forgotten about that quest.
I know, it was
the
so-
trauma
it was-
pushed
it was-
down.
It was kind of a quick quest. It was
Yeah.
like
It's-
murdered that woman, and then immediately it was like, well, I guess we should do something else.
Yeah. Really abbreviated that one.
Yeah,
Uh,
but
Killing
yeah,
the main suspect.
yeah, just killer, which is definitely a very D&D solution to the problem. But I think that is kind of an interesting point because I think oftentimes like the destination or the finale of your quest is not going to be nearly as satisfying as the quest itself, you know? And I kind of think in that way D&D is sort of different than other games because I think it's not nearly as destination oriented as other games, you know? Like if you're playing a video game, it's like it's like, oh, I need to like beat this next boss, or I need to reach this checkpoint, I need to complete this quest. And it's like you're like, like the gameplay is like, part of it, but it's like almost you're very destination focused, and it's like, oh, I got to get to the end of this,
Like
and it's
do
like
dailies in an MMO.
yeah, exactly. And it's like the reward or the satisfaction comes from completing it. But I think in D&D, oftentimes the reward, the fun, and the like best part of the experience is like doing the quest itself. And I think oftentimes like it's hard to like because the like your camp because like your when you're playing oftentimes takes place over such a long period of time.
Yeah.
It's hard to get that like satisfying conclusion because oftentimes like you'll find the end, and a lot of your players or like people playing will have kind of forgotten how it started, but they'll remember like. So I think that is something also to kind of take into consideration is like there's no shame in your players kind of being like, who is this guy, if they had fun in the city and they had a good time getting up to that point.
Wow, that's a really good point. That's very strong.
Yeah, I've definitely had players have no idea what they're doing there, but they're having a great time.
Yeah. No idea what's going on, but just having a good time doing it.
So you kind of mentioned that sort of crux, like the moment of like along the journey, there has to be some sort of like conflict before the finalization. How do you guys normally have those situations pan out? Like, do you plan it as a fight? Do you plan it as like a moment of diplomacy or intimidation or like sort of like verbal combat, or is there like a chase involved? Like, what do you guys find yourselves doing most when it comes to like the quests that you put together?
Like the finale, you mean? Like,
I think I've done all three. I've definitely done it where I intend for there to be, to the end of this particular quest, I intend there to be a verbal conflict where it's like you sit down with the enemy that you've been dealing with and you talk to them, right? So
Yeah.
an example of that is if the party were to go into the well and meet up with the dragon that drained the well underneath, that would be a verbal confrontation, as a physical one would likely lead to the player's deaths at a low level.
Yeah.
However, it can change and be more combat scenario centered at a higher level, or because I'm going hoarse from doing the dragon's voice and decide to just go into combat, so I have to keep talking as the dragon.
Yeah.
So I think, but there are other times where I've planned for it to be a physical combat, and I really don't have anything else prepared. But I've also done it where I've had both. So like I have a verbal thing, but it's okay for the combat. Like I'm also ready for the combat, or I have combat, but I'm ready for the verbal out. So I've definitely done it from all scenarios, and I think it's fun to present them one way, but then it'd be the other. So there was one where it seemed like, oh, this is definitely going to be a verbal conflict only.
Yeah.
And I, as the DM, totally was just desperately looking of how can I get my players to initiate the combat in this particular
Yeah.
scenario.
Yeah.
And so yeah, because it's like I wanted it to feel like, oh, it could have gone diplomatically, but
Mm.
you as the players just couldn't handle, the injustice and just had to strike first. Um,
Man.
and I've also had it where, I have no intention for combat, but it goes that way anyway because I just couldn't handle the
It's
injustice of it.
true.
So I definitely think either way, like the satisfying end has a lot more to do with like what did it take to get here, and that's
Yeah.
that's just kind of like pushing off the end till a point where it's kind of ready. And I feel like I usually know at least like a week in advance, like, oh, this is going to be the big confrontation.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. Definitely.
So yeah, I do all the above. I plan for them to fight, and I plan for them to talk. I actually have never planned for like, oh, the plan is to run. I mean, technically, maybe that's happened once or twice, but like, no, that's happened once where I was like, oh, the plan is you're supposed to lose, and then this demon is gonna like meet up with you guys in hell, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and make a deal with you to bring you back to life. But I don't know that I would do that again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the
I think
hardest
it's
one
oh,
for sure.
yeah, yeah.
Josh, you go ahead.
I was gonna say, I do think it's really important to have options as a DM because you just are never gonna know what your players are gonna do, and I think it's like to an extent you can railroad them, and to an extent you can kind of like lead them, but I think it's like sometimes it's like combat really. You don't want combat. Combat is not what you're like hoping, but it's like that's just what's somebody is gonna throw a spear or someone is gonna like cast fireball. Um, so I think it's important to like have a couple ways you can see things going out and have like at least something ready for
You
each
could
one
do
of
my
those.
favorite, where you do mislead, which is that spell that makes you invisible and then gives you an illusory duplicate that you can see through and talk through,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
control. And then your big bad evil guy can leave the room and continue to talk on monologue. So if your crazy player decides to attack them anyway, like whatever, that's enough, time's up, Leroy
Yeah.
Jenkins.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
They attack the illusion, and he's like, I'm not even really here. And it's like, ah. And so you can still make it a verbal conflict.
yeah.
Nice.
That's good.
I'm sure that was
That's
very
such a like
intentional.
Metroid thing to do. Is like you like the old winning the game, losing the cutscene trick.
Yeah. Oh man, those frustrate me so much in video games.
Yeah,
But
but
it makes sense.
yeah,
I would.
I guess also like kind of on the topic of like your quest, like at the end of quest, how do you guys handle things like loot and rewards? I think we touched on this a little bit, like, but yeah, like what do you kind of have like a plan prepared or yeah?
So I've done loot both ways, where I have it like I've created a specific magic item for a specific player, um, and
Mhm.
I am ready to award it at a specific time. And kind of failure or success, they'll still get it because I really need them to have it for one reason or other, for
Yeah.
story purposes, or because I feel like that player is really lacking something and needs this to fill like a hole, or like they're just not having enough fun with the way it's set up, and either they just didn't optimize their character properly and everyone else did, and so they feel like, oh, I'm not doing enough damage, and so I'm like, here's a +3 sword with an additional 1d8 frost damage, and then they feel like, yay, I'm helping again.
Yeah.
Or it's like I just literally I have a deck that I bought from Wizards of the Coast, and it's just all the magic items on like cards, and I will just shuffle them and pick a card. Be like, you got a genie wishing lamp. Like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
I think yeah, I don't think you'd always have to do this, but sometimes I think, especially for shorter quests, I think it can be kind of good to like let the party know what they have, like what they stand to gain, is one that's kind of on the topic of like getting people in. But I think like you kind of letting them know, because I
Yeah,
think
hinting
also in
at the
video
loot
games
at the end.
that always happens where it's like, like, oh, here's this quest, and then it'll say like in the corner like, oh, this is how much XP you get, and like these
There's
are like the
options for you to
weapons
pick
you'll
from.
get. Yeah, like this is the
Yeah.
stuff that you can get at the end.
No,
And
dude, you're right. That's like one of the biggest things in World of Warcraft. I'm like looking at a quest and I'm like, I don't want to go all the way. Oh, that sword is does 10 more damage than mine.
yeah,
Except,
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So
very,
it can
very
be good to
true.
like, and I think that is for definitely for specific party members and specific players, like that will always be more interesting than like, like, oh, like the NPCs and their motivations and their like who they are is like, oh, this is going to be a sick weapon at the end, or like, oh, I can get some magic items. I
yeah,
think that is.
I think something that you can do that doesn't work unless you've done the groundwork, you've laid the foundation, is awarding your players with lots of money, but they need somewhere to spend it. And so it's like it's the same thing but slightly different. So you have the quest is like, "Oh, we'll give you 500,000 gold if you can do this thing." And the party's like, "Oh, really?" Because there's this particular magic shop that sells a particular magic item that they
Yeah.
want. And it's like, "Oh, we'll be able to buy that item if we can afford it." The only reason I haven't done that much as a DM is because my players, you guys and some others, are more inclined to be like, oh, well, that magic item's in that shop. Let's just go steal it.
Yeah, exactly.
Or let's try to charm the guy and like put a bag over his head and
Yeah,
steal it. Or like
finagle the
let's
price.
kill him and steal it. Or
Yeah.
or like so I feel like the chances, and it's not like you guys are murder hobos, but it's just really hard to be like, but he's what? He's a shopkeep. And I'm like, a level 11 warlock. Like, what are the chances that he's also, going to be able to handle the whole party? All right, let's just kill him and steal it.
Oh my
Like,
Yeah,
god,
true.
yeah. Yeah.
so I'm always nervous to put really powerful magic items in the hand of like a shopkeep because it's like, well, what if you just kill him and steal it? So it's hard. But I think if you have a party of people who don't kill them and steal it, I think you can absolutely be like, yeah, the vendor has these cool magic items
Yeah.
and you can go get money. I have done
Yeah.
that by using a character that's essentially like invincible. His name is Elvani, and he's a weird
Oh.
merchant that will show up in my campaigns every once in a
Good
while
old
to
Elvani.
specifically sell them whatever it is that they want at that moment so they can offload their gold.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
He's
he
also, I think,
uh-huh.
because he's like transcendent of all of our campaigns.
Yeah.
Whenever we run into him, it's like, oh, like why would we kill this guy? Like he's like, you don't
Yeah.
even think to attack him.
I don't
Exactly.
But I
You
think
don't
that's
want to mess
also
with that. You don't want to mess with the guy who's like busts through the fourth wall to shake your hand.
Yeah.
But I think also on that same topic, I think it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
to one way to handle that is like instead of like saying like here's the magic item, go get money, come back and buy it, instead being like, oh, and I think this works for more linear campaigns, but like, oh, we're headed towards this city where you can buy like, oh, where they have anything you could possibly imagine. And it's like as you go along, your guy get your characters and players, they get money and then they have resources. And then once they have money and resources, that's when you're like, oh, here is somewhere where you can spend it. So
And
then
then
it's
you
like,
reference the
then if you have,
item.
then if you have a bunch of, as like a player, I think if you have a bunch of money, you're more like, well, I should just spend my money instead of like, dealing with trying to kill this guy to like get his stuff and then try to get rid of his body. Yeah, it's a
You know what
hassle.
I could do? I think I just figured out that you just don't have it be a shopkeep. You're just like, oh yeah, there's an ancient gold dragon who has a magic shop in town.
It's true.
And you walk
Or
in and he's just in dragon form, taking up most of the building. And he's like, oh, what can I do you for? It's like, okay, I get
Yeah.
it. Don't try to kill him and take the magic item.
There is a rock
Yeah.
that has a hole in it, and you put the money in, and then the thing that you want comes out. You cannot kill the rock. It is a
Yeah.
rock.
yeah, or it's like this NPC, you like try to attack them and it's like, it just doesn't work, like your sword just swings.
It's just, you walk in and you're like, what? It's like, oh, it's Eos, the creator of the entire universe. is the shopkeep. And he opens his mouth and understanding is bestowed upon you. You know his prices now. What do you want?
You know
Oh
his
my
prices
God.
now.
Like, did he
That's
say
where he
anything else?
settles
Like,
down.
no. He didn't say anything. He just opened his mouth and you became knowledgeable.
You breathed knowledge into your mind.
That's
Oh, man.
hilarious. Yeah.
I wanted to mention a point when it comes to loot that I do for my campaigns, and I don't think that I've mentioned this before, but I often, what I'll do, if I don't have a set item that I referenced beforehand, I'll give loot based on how much my players have struggled to complete the quest. It doesn't matter if I myself have made the quest easy or hard. It depends on how much my players have fucked up and bumbled around and stumbled their way.
Like just how difficult it was for him. Yeah. Interesting.
Exactly. So if even if it's a very simple concept where it's like try to convince this bird to give you its egg because it's important for this recipe, like if that's the hardest thing for my players, if that's like just like a
Yeah.
complete arduous task and it takes the whole session or like a session and a half and they finally get it and they give it, I'm not gonna be like, great, I had this plan for like 100 gold for you guys. Like, no.
Yeah.
I'm gonna up the loot. I'm gonna be like, wow, no one has been able to get this egg for centuries. It's super important. Here, you guys, you get to open up his safe and take your pick from inside of his heirlooms.
I like that. I like that. I definitely have had that happen where I threw a green dragon. I think it was an adult green dragon. Yeah, it was an adult green dragon I threw at you guys, and you killed him in like 5 rounds. And I was just like,
Yeah.
wow, I meant for that to take most of the session. Okay. And I've also had like, yeah, like this little girl won't stop crying, and you guys spend like 3 weeks real time trying to figure it out. And it's like, yeah, sometimes what seems like a surface level should be difficult and then therefore rewarding,
Yeah.
isn't, and then vice versa. So yeah, I like that idea. I think something you could also do is promise experience or like a level up. So it's like, guys,
Yeah.
if you do this quest, you will level up, or I'll give you X amount
Yeah.
of experience points upon
That's really
completion.
good too.
That's that talk about getting motivated.
Yeah,
'Cause that's motivation
very
for
concrete.
for the players themselves, and they're
Yeah.
like, yeah. Because who doesn't want to level up?
And they're really committed.
Yeah, they're willing to die for this
Unstoppable.
quest.
Yeah.
Something too that I've done is like throughout the quest, I'll give like little items to keep people like kind of on the loot, like to little items instead of like a large treasure, large treasure at the end. Almost kind of like leaving like treats in a line to get your dog to go somewhere specific, but kind of like giving little like, especially when people like do something really like creative or they figure out like a difficult puzzle or they're like just really really invested in looking into like a specific place that is like, this isn't even like, I had a player in a campaign that I ran for my fiance's family was like they anyways, the one player was so obsessed with getting into this specific house, and the house wasn't like, it wasn't any, it was like the brother of the person that went missing's house, and that wasn't a real house or anything, and they were just so obsessed. And then they spent like they like left the party, they spent the entire time trying to break in, but they were rolling so bad and they were like weren't tall enough to get into the windows, so they were just like struggling and they eventually got in. And then like I was like, well, they have to be rewarded for this. It's similar to Ben's, but then they found like the brother's journal and it had like all these really important clues, and it ended up being like, oh, such an important thing. And like even there was a magic item that was like super useful for the player. But it was just like it was kind of like they took they were really invested in this thing, and I was like, well, I feel like I should reward them for their like investment,
Yeah, because I mean, ideally, if we had infinite time to play D&D, right? If we had 12 hours every Saturday to play D&D, it would be like, yep, you guys just wasted 2 hours and it's just an empty house. I don't know
Yeah.
why you're interested in that. All right, let's move on.
Yeah.
But when you've only got 3 hours to play and they spend 2 hours, it's like you would be a bad dungeon master to not give them something because otherwise it's
Yeah.
like, wow, what a waste of 2 hours of my life, both in game and in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh,
Exactly. Yeah.
it's cruel, an unusual pun.
Yeah. I really think that some of the best ways to design quests are to also connect them to your players' backstories. This is something that Ben does really well as a dungeon master,
Hmm.
Thank you.
and it's some of the stuff that has motivated me as a player to keep me the most on track. And it's because it's like, well, I am so deeply invested into what's going on. I don't need rewards. I don't need XP. I don't, there's no mystery to solve. Like, I know what's going on. My son has been corrupted and has become evil, and I'm trying to redeem him. And it's like, I don't care about anything. I'm just on this mission to just do this. Or it's like, you know, I don't know, like my name, if your character is like super about, their standing as a I don't know what to call it.
Like a person, a legend.
Yeah, like as like a paladin or something, they're like, oh, I can't have my name, you know,
Painted.
tainted. Yeah, and it's like someone is spreading rumors about them. It's like, okay, well now I'm really invested into figuring out who this is and why they're doing it and what's going on.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I think it's like find making your quests not tying in players' backstories, but like making the world your players' backstories. So
Mm.
it's not like,
Yeah.
oh, I'll throw in a quest that has a little something something to do with them. It's like, no, no, no. Um, this whole storyline is just because of your backstory.
Mm.
Yeah.
I always say if your character feels like they have like a mark or an impact in the world around them, then that's a good campaign. Like if and then the best way to do that is just like base the world around people's backstories, because that's how much they write and invest into their own story is how much that they'll get out of that story.
Yeah, it's true. And it's like it's a role playing game. And it's like I think more than anything, you're invested in your character,
But
more
also,
than
your
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 items and stuff.
players should be the main characters of the story. No
Yeah.
one's Nothing that's going on in the world should trump what's going on in your characters' lives. And I think that's something that took me a long time to learn as a DM. In the first real campaign that I did that lasted a long time, that priest, Alnock Lansing, was essentially the main character. His lineage and all that stuff was the most important thing. And it's because as a DM, I was so invested in the world that I was building that I hadn't given much thought to my player's backstory. And so it's like the players were almost, an audience to the world rather than the
Yeah.
main characters of the story. They were kind of like watching and observing the world as it grew and developed. And they were fascinated by it and they enjoyed the story, but I feel like I should just write a book if that's what I want to do. If I want an audience to my
Yeah.
story, you write a book. But if you want to play D&D, I think your players should be the main characters of that story. And all I would have had to do to shift that is to just find one of the characters in the party that I could make the prophesized one. And it would have been
Yeah.
so easy because the whole prophecy was like the priest, the Alnock Lansing, didn't know he was the chosen one. And he had to be convinced that he was. And so how easy would it have been to go, oh, you're the long lost descendant of the king that, the god, of the sun and the king had a child, and you're that lost descendant. And your memory has been wiped because of the
Yeah.
god of trickery and lies or something like that. Or your mother, the god, erased your memory so that you could have a normal life because that's something their first child always lamented, is that they
Right.
grew up not only the son of a king but the son of a god, the god of the sun. And
Yeah.
it was like I just can't relate to normal people. And so it's like, oh, okay. So it's like, oh, what are you doing? You're just questing? Well, who's this person always watching you? What's going on? Who are all these people who like always seem to show up to rescue you? It's like, well, they're the you were being watched this whole time because you're the royal whatever, and we're trying to give you the illusion of a normal life, but you're actually It's like that's so easy to make your characters the main story.
Yeah.
And even beyond that, rather than having a main story to make the characters about, take their backstories and make that the main story.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
hear that? You hear that, DMs out there? Get to work. There's some good ideas coming out right here. Oh.
Last call, guys. Last call.
Oh, damn.
Oh,
Can I get
boy.
6 more drinks?
Oh yeah, man. Just
Oh,
gotta-
thank you.
Paper bag and then
I was gonna.
Yeah.
I was gonna.
Yeah, here. It's just this bag, my paper bag. It's a paper bag I'm holding.
Gosh,
So
I'm
it's
out of paper bags. Here, I have a quest for you.
yeah.
Go to the town over.
Wait,
and get
Uh-huh.
I
a
can do that.
stack of 100 paper bags.
I may
What's
be
my
half
XP?
this
What's
guy's
my XP
size,
out of
but
this
I can
situation?
run twice as fast. I swear.
Yeah, but
I
how many
will reward you
teleportation
with
spells do you have on hand? Yes, good.
You'll get 155 reputation with the Nosy Drag Inn. Okay.
Okay.
I will also give you 50% off those 6 drinks.
Oh, damn it!
And happy hour will last 1 more hour for you every week.
Okay.
Draw your
Damn.
sword.
Damn.
Draw your sword.
You know what? I might have to give this to you because
Wait, what?
those 6 drinks. I'm actually in the middle of a different quest, and I get,
Oh.
and I'm comparing the two. I think this one I'm on is a little bit better. So I'll let you do this one, and I'll come back for the quest next time. We'll just alternate.
I'll also tell you where your mother is, the one you've been looking for 50
Oh,
years.
shit. That's
too
the
late.
quest I'm doing right now is to help me
You already
get there.
gave it. You already gave it to me. I'm gonna find your mother so fast. I don't even care. I'm gonna get those bags at half off.
No.
I'm
No.
sure she's a wonderful lady.
All right, get out of my tavern.
I'm leaving.
All right. Cheers. See you next quest.